A warm welcome, a virtual welcome to this webinar that we are hosting at Tænketanken Europa. My name is Lykke Friis, I'm the Director of Tænketanken Europa. And this webinar is part of a series that we are doing basically on the new coalition patterns after Brexit. How have things changed? What kind of new opportunities, but also challenges does Brexit create for Denmark, but obviously for all countries as such, because Britain played such a substantial role, at least on many issues. I think one can already see that with the budget negotiations this summer in July, at least it's an open question whether the budget negotiations would have been finalized if Britain had been around the table. This seminar is co-sponsored by the EU-nævnet, so thank you very much for that. And we are organizing most of these seminars in cooperation with our strategic partner, the European Council for Foreign Relations. And one of the reasons why we're doing that is that ECFR, so the European Council for Foreign Relations, has just finalized its third coalition explorer, which basically tries to find out, to put it very sort of bluntly, who do you phone when you're in trouble, and who do you phone when you want to obtain some new visions or concrete projects in the European Union. I'm sure that our guest, Piotr Buras, who I'll introduce in a second, will also say a bit more about sort of the technicalities behind the Coalition Explorer, but you can find it on our webpage, but also on the webpage of ECFR. And you could say that I'm not revealing many secrets when I say that Denmark and Poland are maybe sort of not the most sort of likely sort of coalition partners, but we're looking into a number of countries. That's basically the purpose here. So we're looking into Poland, we're looking into Ireland, we're looking into Netherlands, Spain, and obviously to get an overview also of what's the policy like in the various member states. I just ask people to mute themselves so we're not having this noise in our head. But obviously you could say when you look upon Denmark and Poland, there are, I mean, several at the moment sort of areas where there's definitely not sort of a great consensus. One could mention climate change, one could mention rule of law, just as two examples. And also in Denmark, there has been quite a debate.
Lykke, you muted yourself.
I was muted by the host here, so let's see whether I think I'm back on track. Yeah, so, but thank you very much. So, but this is something that we want to explore, and particularly, I mean, could one imagine that maybe also the bilateral area, there could be more areas of potential cooperations between Denmark and Poland, but they are also just become wiser on the overall domestic situation in Poland. So that is the overall purpose of this webinar. And we are very grateful that you, Piotr Buras, have accepted our invitation to participate. You head the ECFR office in Warsaw, but you have also worked for many years, as far as I remember, as a correspondent in Berlin. So you're also a very strong sort of voice with regards to the German-Polish relationship, which is obviously also something I think that we'll touch upon during this conversation. And throughout the conversation, we'll start out with the domestic situation in Poland, and I'll obviously also ask you sort of to say quite a bit about the Coalition Explorer. What does it actually say about the role of Poland? It's interesting that Poland is still potentially sort of the third sort of most influential country in the EU. Those who have read already the Coalition Explorer will see that it's Germany and then it's France, and then there's not really a clear number three. So that's something that we'll discuss. And then obviously we'll also get into the overall sort of situation between Denmark and Poland. Are we on each other's mental maps? I mean, would definitely be a question I'll ask you looking into the Coalition Explorer. And there will be time at the end, please use the chat function to raise questions on all matters here that we'll be discussing. And I will make sure that the questions then are sort of put sometimes also maybe earlier than if it fits into the overall sort of discussion. So I think that's our game plan. So without further ado, Piotr, over to Warsaw. And I'll basically start by asking you to to highlight the overall political situation in Poland, taking us back, not to 89, not to worry, but back to the presidential election, because that was the last time that we in Denmark really had a lot of debate and focus upon the situation in Poland. Floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lykke, and thank you for inviting me to join this conversation. I'm very grateful for you for setting this up. And indeed, I think it's to go straight into the matter. I think we are when it comes to the Polish domestic policy in a very interesting moment now, quite unexpectedly, because you referred to the presidential election in July, the postponed presidential election. As you remember, the presidential election was planned to be held in May, but didn't take place because of the corona pandemic. It was a source of a major political conflict in Poland around the date of the presidential election. But in the end, the election took place in July, and it was hailed as probably the watershed moment in the Polish democracy after 1989, because the expected victory of Andrzej Duda, who indeed won the election, the incumbent president back then from the ruling party, Law and Justice, would, as many commentators believed and argued, would solidify the grip of this conservative populist party on the power structures in Poland. The Law and Justice, the party of Jarosław Kaczyński, has been in power in Poland since 2015 and won the parliamentary election last year. So it means it will govern the country until 2023. So the fact that its president, the president who used to be a member of the party and who is very much proved to be very supportive of anything the party did over the last 5 years, would be re-elected, was of course seen as a perspective which basically determined the course of the Polish politics over the next at least 4 years. And indeed, Duda, as we know, won the election in July. Poland proved to be extremely polarized and split when it comes to the support for the two candidates, Duda on the one hand and Trzaskowski, the liberal candidate, on the other. But in the end, Duda has stayed in power, and so we could have expected that basically that would prolong this very smooth rule of Law and Justice, having the absolute majority in the parliament and the president in office, basically controlling all the major offices in the power structures of the Polish state. But then something quite unexpected happened, namely a major conflict within the ruling coalition broke out, and the conflict has not ended yet, and it's probably for the external observers not entirely comprehensible how it is possible that the ruling camp, after two major victories, suddenly plunges into this kind of major internal struggle. But to cut a long story short, I would say that the background of this internal conflict is not actually, about programmatic issues and political direction of the country. Here, the agreement among the main stakeholders of the ruling camp is rather broad. But the real fight is about who would become the successor of Jarosław Kaczyński as the leader of the Polish Unified Right, which is the official name of the ruling camp. because as perhaps not so many are aware of it, but the ruling camp in Poland is not one single party, Law and Justice, but this Law and Justice party is the main coalition partner in a broader framework, which consists also of two minor parties, which now want, obviously, on one hand, have more influence upon the policies and government of Law and Justice. And secondly, one of the leaders of this minor partner, Zbigniew Ziobro, who is the Minister of Justice and the person responsible for the judicial reforms which provoked such a clash with the European Commission and our partners on rule of law. He has obviously the ambition to become the successor of Kaczynski. And he is also in a major conflict with the Prime Minister Morawiecki. So this is actually a very, internal, personal struggle. I don't want to go into much details, but about that, because I don't think it's so relevant. These details would be so relevant for external observers. But what is interesting is that this conflict will be probably solved, and as it seems, there will not be a break of the coalition. The coalition will survive. Kaczynski might even become a member of the government, not the prime minister, but member of the government responsible for this security policy, internal security, also justice affairs, overseeing these files as the vice prime minister. This is the recent information which we could receive.
And can I just ask? Can I just ask you? Was that completely unpredictable? I mean, because I also followed the election in Poland. Was also briefly in Poland, and I can't really remember that was sort of the debate after the election, that we could have these sort of internal sort of discussions on the government side, or was it just me didn't sort of that I didn't follow these details, or were you surprised by what happened?
I think everybody was surprised of the extent to which this conflict erupted. Yeah. The fact that there were very serious internal disagreements, especially between the Prime Minister Morawiecki and the Minister of Justice Ziobro, that has been clear and obvious for everybody for months, if not longer. But because the Law and Justice achieved its goal of re-electing Duda, and basically had this major victory, which was also a victory of Kaczynski. So one could have expected that these internal struggles would not basically blow up to such an extent. But but obviously these personal ambitions were prevailing here. And I think the whole story shows that this ruling camp is not as united as we might have thought, and that Kaczynski's power is also waning. And I think this is indisputable. He might perceive himself as a winner of the whole current spot, but I don't think the united right as a ruling coalition will ever get back to its internal unity and also power it had in the last few years. And this is related also to the fact that coming to a different aspect of the domestic situation, that we are heading for difficult times also in Poland, not only in Europe, but also in Poland economically. Poland is economically in a very good shape comparing to other countries. The recession this year is estimated in Poland for not even 5% of GDP, which is, comparing to other countries, actually quite okay. But at the same time, we have most probably reached our limits when it comes to the public expenditures, and the crisis of the public finances is looming on the horizon. The deficit this year will be officially around 5% of the GDP, which is not much, but this is actually all experts, economic experts, believe that this is not real. There are some hidden expenditures, some accounting tricks. The fact is that the real budgetary deficit is probably double as high, maybe 9%. Some people even believe it's much more than that. So, and this is due to the fact that Law and Justice introduced a lot of important social reforms, which also gained support in the society. But some of them, at least, certainly went beyond a rational economic policy, like introducing, the 13th and 14th pension payments or monthly rates of pension payments, which costs a lot of money, the budget, and does not really lead to any substantial investments into the country's economic transformation. So I think this is the reality that we are heading for quite difficult times, and this is also related. And this is the last thing I wanted to say about the challenges ahead, also related to the EU and the direction in which the EU is going. I think the Green New Deal and very ambitious climate policy goals, which will be probably even strengthened with the CO2 emissions reduction goals, 55%, as the Commission suggests. That's of course a huge challenge for Poland. And the economic, especially the energy transformation, will be a major challenge for Poland in the upcoming years. And I think this is, of course, at the same time, it is a huge challenge, but the fact that the EU is ready to support this transformation and invest a lot of money into that is also an opportunity for Poland. But this is probably the main at the moment, the main economic and also social challenge that Poland is facing in the next 1 or 2 decades, and the decisions need to be taken very quickly about the direction of this transformation. So I think what is politically very important, that we are at a watershed moment in many ways, and the next 2-3 years will be really decisive when it comes to the direction of the Polish, especially economic transformation. And these are the years where Poland will be governed by the Law and Justice government, as it seems. So, because for some time, at least in the spring, there were also in the European Union and in our partner countries, there were hopes or expectations that perhaps there would be a different government, which would be, but no, I mean, there won't be a different government. So we probably need to take into account that this is the government with which we will live for another 3 years, and also it will have some implications for our partners and the European Union.
Yeah, that's obviously a very important point, that here we have a very sort of stable situation, despite sort of what you mentioned with the internal discussions about who should succeed Kaczynski. But I mean, it is a clear situation with until 2023. I mean, this is the government of Poland. But I was just wondering, could you also just say a few words about the recovery sort of plan, the negotiations, how that was perceived in Poland, and obviously they also touch upon rule of law. the overall sort of rule of law mechanism. There's been lots of debate about what did they actually agree upon after those, was it 5 days, where they nearly beat the record of the European Council in Nice in 2000. That is also, I think, a lot of sort of have interest for Danish audience. And after that, we'll move to the Coalition Explorer.
Yeah.
Over to you again.
Yes, thank you. Of course, I mean, the recovery fund and the whole MFF discussion, it has been a major topic for Poland. Poland is traditionally has been a main beneficiary of the EU budget, and of course has followed the discussion, participated in the discussion, contributed to the discussion at the EU level very much. And I think the outcome is seen in Poland as very positive. Poland will belong to the main beneficiaries, both of the MFF again and the recovery fund. It's I think 125 billion euro in the next 7 years, including the recovery fund, plus in grants, plus 150 billion euro in or not euro, zloty, so it means 30 billion euro in loans, and this is of course one could compare it with the previous EU budgets. It's of course much more in general. It's this money will be more difficult for Poland to get, because of course the risk is that we need to come up with very good plans how to meet the sort of green criteria of at least part of the money, which is one challenge. The other challenge is, of course, and this is related to the state of the public finances, that the EU investments need to be matched by national contributions, and that needs to be available. And so the question is to what extent the Polish also local governments and the state government will be able to do that. So there are some, of course, question marks, but Poland. And generally, I mean, the Polish government has praised it as a big success, the outcome of the negotiations, and I think it has also been a success from the Polish point of view. There is a question of the rule of law conditionality, and of course, very vividly discussed in Poland as well. And the Polish government seems to apply a quite staunch position in opposition to the idea of introducing a rule of law mechanism which would not be based upon very clear criteria. The question is what should this criteria be about? As we remember, the proposal which is at the moment on the table, which the Commission put forward 2018, it basically gives the Commission a lot of discretion to define if there is a problem with the rule of law in a country, which could trigger a suspension of EU payments, and introduced a sort of reversed qualified majority for the adoption of this kind of decision. And that was contested by Poland and many other, and also Hungary openly, but also other countries were not very happy with that. Charles Michel changed this proposal and introduced the simple or ordinary qualified majority decision to adopt this kind of decisions, which of course, and we need to be very blunt about it, I think it would kill the whole rule of law mechanism completely, because if there is a situation that the Commission proposes a suspension of EU funds for a country violating rule of law principles, and you need a qualified majority in the EU Council to accept this decision so that it can be implemented, so you can easily assume that you will never get this qualified majority in the Council for such a decision. And this is our experience with the Article 7. It's exactly the same mechanism. The Commission can ask the EU Council to state that there is a severe risk of rule of law violation in the country, but then you need a qualified majority to accept it. And we know that neither in the case of Poland nor in the case of Hungary, it has been possible to get together this kind of majority. So why would it be possible for a decision to suspend EU funds? I think it's easy to find an answer. So I think here the problem is when it comes to this EU rule of law mechanism that we can possibly have something which will be agreed upon, but it will not be efficient at all. I mean, it will be a completely useless mechanism. I think there is a risk. I mean, from the perspective of those who support this kind of mechanism, I think there is a discussion what has been agreed upon at the European Council summit in July, because the provisions of the summit conclusions are very unclear. And the position of the Polish government is, as I understand, that basically Poland has still a possibility, or other countries has still a possibility to veto any proposals. This is not the position of the Commission. This is not the position of the German presidency. They both clearly stated that there will be a qualified majority decision in the Council to adopt or not a proposal put forward by the European Commission. But the fact is that Poland and other countries has some leverage on those decisions. As we know, the European Union needs to accept a new own resources decision, or adopt a new own resources decision, which requires consent of all EU member states. And here the question is about what will be the sequence of those decisions. Will we have an own resources decision before we have an agreement on the rule of law mechanism, or only after? And the position of Poland and Hungary is that we need to sort out the rule of law problem. And only if this is the outcome of this discussion is satisfactory for Warsaw or Budapest, we can discuss the own resources of the European Union. So I think this is a sort of a negotiating tactics, but I'm sure it will certainly play a certain role in those discussions. And I wonder also to what extent the migration pact will become part of the negotiation package. I mean, the migration pact put forward yesterday by the Commission, because of course many countries want to have an agreement on that, and will perhaps be ready or able to make trade-offs with those who oppose it.
So the jury is still very much out there, to use a legal term. But let's move on to the Coalition Explorer. Could you just say a few words about what it is, and then particularly also what it shows about the Polish situation, Polish influence? Is Poland sort of on the rise with regards to influence, or is it going the other way? And then we
yes,
move,
I'm very happy to do that. I will. Situation. And I will show you, hopefully you can see it now on your screen.
Yes.
This is, just a second. Yes, so you can show it. This is, the Coalition Explorer is I think it's a very interesting tool developed by the ECFR to measure the coalition potential of various or all EU member states, and also their influence in the European Union. And this is based upon a very unscientific or not entirely academic approach, but we conduct a survey among policymakers, diplomats, experts, think tankers in all EU member states, and ask them lots of questions about who them phone first when they want to solve certain problems, what countries they believe are most influential in the EU, what countries in their opinion favor deeper integration or not, and so on and so forth. So these are very subjective actually opinions by those respondents, but we believe, and I think I don't want to go into details, but I think there is also proof of that it is quite a telling picture of mutual perceptions of policymakers and advisors in the EU, and it's quite telling about the relations among the EU member states in the EU. So we had more than 800 respondents this year from all EU member states. Of course, the number varied from country to country. So it's, as I said, it's not scientific. Please don't take it as a scientific approach and scientific proof.
But it always stirs debate, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's just it can help you understand certain processes. And so maybe I will. Lykke has already mentioned that neither Poland or Denmark perform particularly well in the survey this year. We do it every year, but let's have a look at a few criteria, a few data. So here we have these overall results, and this overall means the overall influence of a country in the EU. So we have Poland occupies the 4th rank as the taking all possible indicators into account. Poland is the 4th most influential country in the EU. Denmark is in the middle of the group, and the 12th position. So I think it largely corresponds with the probably a very sort of general feeling that Poland is a big country, so it should be influential. Denmark is smaller, so it's probably slightly less influential. But then if you take some other indicators, so you see a slightly different picture. So you have, for example, the most disappointed countries in the European Union, this category, and you have Poland, who is the 2nd most disappointed country in the EU, according to our respondents. So basically, the expectations towards Poland seem to be quite high, but they are largely very disappointed. The only more disappointed country is Hungary. Denmark is in this category rather low. I mean, it's again the 12th position, so it's pretty average. What is interesting is also the question about who is punching above its weight and who is punching below its weight. And you have here Poland is the 3rd the 3rd country in the ranking of those who are punching below its weight, according to our respondents. Italy and Spain are topping us, and Denmark again is on the 10th position. So rather, we can say the respondents tend to believe that Denmark could be punching a little bit higher. But now, this is just the overall ranking. Let's move to a few more detailed questions. We have the category where we measure the preferences of, just a second, I hope it will work. Perhaps the internet connection is not very
In the
yes.
basement.
Now we, yeah, it's in the basement. No, but it's working. So now let's take Denmark and see which are the countries most contacted by Denmark in the European Union. So the question is, which of the EU member states does your country's government generally contact most on European policy matters? And the respondents say, so you have the first five countries: Germany, Sweden, Netherlands, Finland, France. And what is interesting, Poland doesn't exist on the list.
So here we
nobody.
We are not on your map, yeah.
It doesn't feature at all. If we take Poland, the same question about Poland, it's a similar picture. We have Poland, the most contacted country for the Polish European policymakers, Hungary. Then we have Germany, then Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Lithuania. So basically the Visegrad countries and Germany. Denmark does not exist on the list, does not feature at all. So what is interesting for our conversation about the Polish-Danish relations, I think we don't see each other. I mean, this is, of course, as I say, very simplified picture, not scientific, but this is what our Coalition Explorer shows. Then let's take a different question and shared interest. So here the question is, which EU member states generally share many of your country's longer standing interests on EU policy? And here we have the responses from Poland. So again, this is a very similar picture. Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Lithuania, Romania are seen, so basically Central Eastern European countries are seen by Poland as those sharing our interest. Denmark is just 1%, so it's 1 of 50 respondents from Poland basically indicated Denmark as a country with shared interest with Poland. And when it comes to Denmark, the same question. Denmark is pointing to Sweden, to Netherlands, Germany, Finland, Austria. So the frugals and Germany. Poland, again, does not feature at all on the list of countries with shared interest. So this is probably an explanation why we do not contact Denmark, or we don't contact each other very much. We don't believe that we share so many interests. Then one more very quickly aspect, what are the most disappointing countries? And here, interestingly, in Denmark, there's also, from the Danish perspective, Poland is very disappointing. 30% of the Danish policymakers, experts, point to Poland as a very disappointing country. In the opposite way, it's not the case. In Poland, France is very disappointing. Germany, Netherlands, but Denmark, there are no strong feelings about Denmark. That would be my bottom line.
And not a feeling that something is rotten in Denmark either, apparently.
Yeah.
So,
But then let me maybe. Oh, sorry. Just now you see something wrong. But let me just show you just very briefly one final thing. What are the countries' priorities in the EU? Because I think this is, to compare these priorities would perhaps help us understand better the bilateral relations. So Poland, here are the priorities, the list of the priorities of various countries when it comes to the EU policy. In Poland, the priority number 1 is Russia, number 2, single market, then energy policy, USA policy, US, the relations with the US, and climate on the 5th place. When it comes to Denmark, what the Danish policymakers indicate is climate number one, digital migration, single market, and borders. So you also see that the list of the priorities is also quite different. So I will perhaps stop here. I could, show you more of these of this data, but I encourage you to go to the ECFR website, and I think it's an interesting tool and interesting source.
So thank you very much. So basically, from this perspective, having a closer cooperation between Denmark and Poland in the EU does not seem very likely from this perspective. But I mean, possibly, I mean, what about sort of bilateral sort of cooperation? Could you see that? Maybe not from this coalition explorer as such, but in general, do you see tendencies there?
I think.
What about energy efficiency, for instance, the overall transformation of Poland?
Yes.
It may not be sort of in an EU context, but I mean, obviously, Poland also has to live up to the various sort of goals, also renewable energy and so forth. I mean, could that be an area? It's obviously happening also.
I think definitely. I think there are two dimensions of this Polish-Danish relations. I think the one is the cooperation at the EU level, and here I think the problem is perhaps not so much that our interests diverge, but my impression is that both countries are currently in a very defensive mode when it comes to the future of the European integration, and so we could have a certain negative agenda, but I don't see very much potential. Yeah. Yes, and migration or defense or whatever, because I think from the Polish perspective, the direction in which the EU is currently going is in many ways problematic. I mean, the insistence on very ambitious climate goals, the very important place migration policy occupies at the EU agenda, some instances of protectionism and internal market. These are a rule of law, of course, conditionality, and so this is from the perspective of the current, at least for the current Polish government, and the traditional definition of Polish interests. I think Poland is sort of discomforted by many developments at the EU level, but and I think Denmark is, and that was quite clear from the coalition explorer, is also not a country which would wish very much, a deeper integration in the EU, and is also opposed to many initiatives, of course, apart from those who are Denmark's priorities, like climate or digitalization, and here, of course, Denmark is in the forefront. But when it comes to the bilateral relations, I think this is perhaps, it might look as sort of a paradoxical conclusion, but I think indeed the energy transformation and climate policy, this is an area where when Poland and Denmark could do quite a lot, and I think quite a lot is going on already, because I think the fact that Poland perceives the energy transformation and climate policy as such a big challenge, it's also an opportunity, because we really need to do a lot and adjust our not only energy sector but also heating sector and the whole area related to how to use the energy sources and where to get them from. This is a huge potential for modernization and a huge need for modernization. And I think when it comes to Denmark and Poland, of course, the offshore wind energy, wind parks in the Baltics, this is certainly the future of the Polish energy transformation. It will, and according to the new plans of the Polish government, they have not been yet officially adopted, but the thinking is going into the direction that we need to invest much more in offshore wind energy. And this is certainly something Denmark is also interested in for obvious reasons, not only in cooperation in basically getting the energy, but also in the Danish companies are as potential investors, and it's already happening. I mean, it's the talks are ongoing, and I think this is definitely an area where I see a huge potential.
Okay, so that's a concrete area of more bilateral cooperation. I'll now open for the chat, and I have one comment here already. It comes from Mateusz Monko, who is the charge d'affaires of the Polish embassy here in Copenhagen. We'll see whether it's possible to hear directly now from Mateusz Monko.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Nice to hear your voice.
Thank you very much, Lykke, for hosting this webinar and with a special focus on Poland. And thank you, Piotr, for the introduction to the Polish politics and your interesting remarks about the possible cooperation. Just a short comment. When you look at the Coalition Explorer, I think there are many similarities to the Eurovision Song Contest because EU countries tend to create clusters and they often vote for one another. So this is, I think, important in current situation when many countries, not only Denmark and Poland, look for new alliances and new coalitions. And when I look at the Coalition Explorer, I think one of the downsides of this tool, which is an extremely interesting tool, is the fact that it overlooks and maybe doesn't fully reflect the ongoing sectorial cooperation between Poland and Denmark. And it doesn't show and doesn't point to the potential cooperation in areas in which we have converging positions. We have a very close dialogue, as you said, on energy and climate. As we speak, we have an event at the embassy with people from Polish institutions discussing possible cooperation with Danish partners on wind energy projects, discussing the goals of the energy transformation in Poland. But we also have positions that converge on issues like Eastern policy, single market, defense cooperation, not maybe the EU defense cooperation, but we have a similar mindset when it comes to the NATO cooperation in this area. So we need to cooperate in these areas, and hopefully we will, despite all the obvious limitations and obstacles that you mentioned. And Poland is willing to engage in this cooperation, and we as the embassy will definitely steer in this direction. So thank you again for this interesting discussion.
Thank you very much. And what do you say, Piotr? Obviously, you could say that the Coalition Explorer, I mean, doesn't deal sort of with sectors such as food, for instance, consumer policy, or what I mean. So I mean, there could be a point here, or what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, we also, perhaps it's a subject for a different discussion about the.
They're more methodological, yeah.
But we, for example, here we also have. I hope you still see it on your screen. We also have a category where we can see which. The answers to the question, which member states does your country's government see as essential partners for cooperating on certain areas? So you can take, for example, climate, and then you see votes by Denmark. So is 3 votes from Denmark for Poland, but no vote from Poland for Denmark, right? As the essential partner in the when it comes to climate policy. We have foreign policy. Do we see each other as important partners? Actually, according to this survey, not. So I'm not saying, I'm not putting into question what Mateusz has just said, because of course this is not an ideal tool, and it also, the aim of the coalition explorer is rather to provoke this kind of exchanges and to have also some pushback on certain findings which may not, as Mateusz said, fully reflect reality. So I think Mateusz is absolutely right that when it comes to defense policy and our, for example, transatlantic orientation, Russia policy, we could do certainly much more. And I'm just wondering, for example, if we could discuss with Denmark in more detail how the European Union should behave now when it comes to Belarus, after Lukashenko, basically inaugurated his new term suddenly yesterday, and the official position of the European Union is that we do not recognize him. But okay, but so what are the conclusions? What are our steps? How should we react? So I think this is, for both for Poland and Denmark, this is probably a very important question. So I think this is the area where I also could see a lot of potential for at least bilateral talks and initiatives, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Otherwise, I think I'll also make the point. The reason why we chose Poland is also that you are kind of in a similar situation as Denmark, in a sense that we have both had very strong ties to United Kingdom. So it'd be interesting to ask you whether you see any sort of, what's the discussion in Poland on the very fact that Britain has left the EU? What implications does that have for Warsaw? Does that mean that you should be more active? Should it be, when one looks upon the coalition explorer, and I take the point about the Eurovision Song Contest, that Poland seems to be cooperating very much with Central and Eastern Europe, and that's also where one sees sort of the high numbers. But do you have a debate in Poland about finding new allies, so to speak, after Brexit, or is it more playing the defense game?
I think, the difference between Denmark and Poland is that, of course, the UK has always been a very important partner for Poland, but probably not to an extent like in Denmark. Poland oriented itself very much for a very long time on Germany and France, and especially Germany, and had this ambition to be part of the EU mainstream, rather than the group of sort of Nordic frugal states, and here there were some limits when it comes to our strategic alliances with those countries, also including the UK. But nevertheless, the Brexit is, of course, for Poland for many reasons a huge problem. This is the one thing is that the UK has always been a champion of single market. And Poland is, I talked briefly about this perception that the direction of the EU integration is to some extent at odds with Poland's national interests. And this is very much the case when it comes to the single market, because Poland is still, I would argue, a champion of liberalization of the single market. More opening, this traditional approach, the market should be more open, the borders should be more open, the mobility should be allowed, and so on and so forth. And this is not really the trend in Europe at the moment, and it's probably no longer the mainstream. And the UK was always the partner who supported this kind of thinking, the Polish thinking. And now we have this sort of protectionist tendencies on the single market. We have the mobility package. We have the directive on posted workers. And this is all of that. The social agenda of the European Union is perceived in Poland as problematic. And the loss of the United Kingdom means that our voice is also much weaker in this debate than it used to be. And then the question is, of course, very interesting from the Polish perspective, where is Denmark in this debate? Because on one hand, Denmark is also seen as one of the champions of the single market, but on the other hand, the social dimension is also important for Denmark, and as I understand, also when it comes to the labor market, labor force mobility, there's no longer such an openness. But maybe I'm wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. In Denmark, so I think this is a very important issue for Poland related to Brexit. And the second is, of course, the foreign policy and defense and the whole idea of European defense in the transatlantic context. And after Brexit, the balance is, from the Polish perspective, has been sort of destroyed with this transatlantic orientation having been weakened, and also the policy towards Russia. The United Kingdom has always been an important ally Poland. So yes, I think there has been a discussion in Poland. Could Poland become a new United Kingdom in the EU? And this is, of course, a tricky discussion because if you take it literally, so Poland replacing the UK as a troublemaker in the EU, it's not really a prospect which would be particularly appealing to us in Poland, nor I think to other Europeans. But of course, the question is to what extent Poland can replace the United Kingdom as one of the major EU member states, and
moving up the list, to be one of the sort of two.
But I think there are some limits to that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Piotr. I think that made us all a lot wiser on the Polish situation. I don't think one can conclude that we have found sort of lots of new potential areas for cooperation, but still, I think we mentioned some. I mean, I think your point about Belarus is a very interesting one. I think also the situation with climate, also at the bilateral level, is an important one. And the single market, I mean, with overall sort of a discussion about free trade. Obviously, there are also areas where there is disagreement, rule of law, just to mention one of them. But I think it was a very sort of important to become wiser on the overall situation, but also simply to get more on each other's mental maps, because I think this is also what this is about. Because, I mean, we are neighboring countries, so obviously we should be following far more what's going on in Poland as Denmark. It's maybe a bit more difficult for Poland also because we have so many neighbors, but still I think that's been definitely worthwhile pursuing this. So thank you very much for your time, and you actually also managed to keep more or less all the participants on board. So I think that is definitely the best sort of remarks one can get when one speaks at a webinar these days. I should make sure also to highlight the next session that we have in this series. This will be on Spain on the 8th of October, where we go to one of your colleagues, Torreblanca, who will then sort of explore with us what are the possibilities of a closer cooperation, if at all, between Denmark and Madrid. So thank you very much. We have put all sort of various links on our website, and we hope to see you all next time. And Piotr, do you have a last sort of farewell to Copenhagen?
An answer?
No, a farewell. That was
yeah. Thank you very much. It has been a great pleasure to be part of this conversation. Thank you for inviting me, and hope we will stay in touch with, as a strategic partner of ECFR. Of course, Tænketanken Europa is always welcome also in Warsaw as partner of our event.
We hope to be traveling soon. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.